I started recording, so please go ahead when you're ready.
Thank you. Hello, it is September 11. This is a 3 o'clock meeting, regular meeting of the Community Resources Committee of the Town Council. I will check to see if everyone can hear us. I'll go around, just indicate if you can hear us and you're present. Jennifer,
I'm here.
Councilor Haneke,
Present.
Pat DeAngelis,
Present.
Pam Rooney is here. I was waiting for Pam Rooney to speak. And Kathy, I think I didn't call on you.
I'm here, thanks.
Thank you. Pursuant to Chapter 2, call the meeting to order. It is 3:02. Pursuant to Chapter 2 of the Acts of 2025, which extends through June 30, 2027, the ability of public bodies to meet in a remote or hybrid manner without a quorum of members in person, this meeting will be conducted via remote means. Members of the public who wish to access the meeting may do so via Zoom or by telephone. No in-person attendance of members of the public is possible, but every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings in real time via technological means. We have at 3:03, we have I'm looking to see if we have attendees. We do not at the moment. We will be continuing the public hearing, and it's 3:03, so we will continue with Article 5 accessory uses public hearing on this. In accordance with the provisions of Mass General Law, Chapter 40A, this public hearing of the Community Resources Committee of the Amherst Town Council has been duly advertised, and notice thereof has been posted and is being held for the purpose of providing the opportunity for interested residents to be heard regarding the following proposed amendments to the zoning bylaw. It is zoning bylaw Article 5 accessory uses. And the basis that we're discussing today is the document from Nate Molloy dated 9/5/2025, which is the planning board's amended document. So to consider amending the zoning bylaw by rescinding section 5.011 accessory dwelling units, ADUs, and replacing with a new section 5.011 that includes provisions for a local ADU and for the protected use ADU, which is permitted by right in accordance with the Mass Affordable Homes Act. We've already covered disclosures, and we have Nate with us to update us on any of the minor changes that came out of the planning board meeting. So let's start with him. Nate, thanks for coming today.
Yeah, thanks. Hi, everyone. Nate Molloy. Excuse me. The planning board, closed their public hearing for this amendment. They recommended 2 types of accessory dwelling units. So the document that's been updated, they did have a discussion, considering whether it would just be the protected use or protected and local. And, they like the idea of providing a larger local ADU. In the end, they understood, what that means in terms of permitting. It's a little different if a local ADU occurs first and the protected occurs second, which means you could have 2 accessory dwelling units on a property. And that was understood. It wasn't, we were pretty transparent about that. I'll share my screen in a minute. The other change that occurred at the planning board hearing was the Attorney General issued a few decisions that clarified using gross floor area, for the protected ADU. And I think at the CRC, we talked about it a bit. And we also then now have gross floor area as the protected, as the calculation for protected and local ADU. So it's both. The difference being for a local ADU, gross floor area doesn't include an unfinished basement space. And so that's, a separate requirement under the local ADU. The bylaws, between the planning board and CRC, we've always tried to maintain consistency. So there's 2 versions that were in the packet. One was protected use and one was for both. And the language should be, the same. If it's, if there's slight differences, that just means some staff didn't catch a change or something, but really we try to change the documents to be consistent. And so what the planning board recommended was the version that has 2 ADUs. And, we incorporated changes from the CRC the last time. So we didn't, for instance, like the bylaw section for rental residential property, we removed 3.50 and just referenced the bylaw section. We did that for parking standards, just, section 7, the parking standards. And there's some minor grammatical changes throughout the document from the planning board. And so really it hasn't changed much from the last time the CRC viewed it, rather, just some clarifications and then the gross floor area. And if you'd like, I can share my screen and we can look at the document or.
Sure, I
Yeah,
wanted,
think that
I
would be
wanted,
useful.
yeah, I think one of the questions that I would like CRC to essentially take a straw poll on is, do we want to support the dual, I'll just call it the dual bylaw with both the local and required ADU, protected ADUs, or just a protected ADU? And I'm not sure how to just handle that. I think I know the outcome, but Kathy.
Nate just flew through, I mean, some of these changes that we're looking at, Nate, were changes we asked you to do. I mean, Mandy's probably a closer reader than I am, but just as you scroll, could you point out anything that we haven't seen before?
Sure, I think this language may have changed about the local of how it's permitted. So it meets the definition and specific requirements in this section of the bylaw. And it shall be permitted following these steps. When a lot has no ADU, the local ADU shall require administrative approval according to section 11 of the zoning bylaw. Or when a lot has a protected use ADU, the local ADU shall be permitted by a special permit from the zoning board of appeals. And so the planning board changed a little bit of this language and just, we have it enumerated as A and B. For gross floor area, that was a change that hasn't, if that was I think in the previous version that hasn't changed. So it's really just, it's right from the regulations.
I'm going to pause you just for a
Mhm.
minute. Kathy, do you still have a question on that?
Oh, no, I just,
Okay.
I'll lower my hand. Sorry, I'm
Pat,
focusing as he's talking.
that's fine.
Yeah.
Pat, you
Yeah,
had
I
your
was
hand up.
just, I come back to it, but I'm trying to understand the planning board change in terms of special permit from the ZBA versus the a local ADU permit.
Right.
Why that change instead of just an administrative approval?
Yeah, it had been in the regulations that it required a special permit, the state regulations. In
The state-
communities, the communities have been interpreting it a little bit differently, but the Attorney General in their decision to a community made it clear that if you allow more than one, protected ADU or ADU on a property, it has to be by special permit. So
That would be the second unit, the second ADU.
Yeah, one
Right.
could be protected, and one could be local, or they could both.
Right.
Thank you.
So for instance, if the way this is written is if someone, if a property owner puts a protected use ADU and then they decide they want a local ADU, that local ADU goes through a special permit process. And that's the state spelled that out, that's the process that needs to happen. Right, we originally had it be by administrative approval, and that's not allowed if it's a
Okay.
second ADU on a property.
Yeah, thank you, Nate.
And
Well-
Nate, can you confirm when under B, which is when a lot already has a protected use
Mhm.
ADU, the local ADU still needs to meet dimensional requirements of that district?
It says that later. Yeah.
It does, yeah. So,
Yeah,
there's
okay.
other requirements found in the bylaw that it has to meet. So, the protected one, right, for instance, could be closer to the side setback, the more permissive regulation. So it could be pretty close to the side setback, and then the local ADU would have to meet the setback in the bylaw for that building.
Thank you.
And just to, I mean, I know you've told us this before, but if it ends up putting two buildings on this property, the amount of land covered by the building or related stuff, those dimensions still apply as well. So it's not just the setbacks, but it's also, so in some the flip side, in some small lots, it's not going to be possible to have three but on larger lots, it will be possible to have three.
Yeah, I mean, it really depends too on how the applicant would like to design their ADU. So, it could be that it's contained within a dwelling and there's
Right.
no expansion of the footprint, but right, all the dimensional standards, so lot and building coverage, side and rear setbacks will apply to the local ADU. And the protected ADU also has to meet dimensional standards too. The difference is they have to be the more permissive between a single family home, the principal dwelling, or an accessory structure in that zoning district. So that's later in the bylaw, but what that means is if, we allow accessory structures to be 10 feet from the property line, and if, say, the side setback is typically 15, then the protected ADU could be 10 feet from the side property line. It's the
Thank
more,
you. Counselor Haneke.
A couple of questions and then just some requests for some basic changes that I can do later that are, there's a lot of extraneous commas and stuff like that in this. But a question I had about the 5.0115, the special requirements for local ADUs, section B.
yeah, I'll scroll down
Um,
there.
Yeah. A local ADU shall be designed so that the appearance and scale is compatible with the principal dwelling unit. I have a question on each of the clauses in this section B. The first sentence, does this make sense if the principal dwelling is not a single family home? Compatible designed so that the scale is compatible with an apartment building or a three-family that's already there. I find it a little strange to have this reference when the principal dwelling doesn't have to be a single family home. And so question on that, what does that mean when it's not a single family home, and how would it be interpreted? And then for the second sentence, detached local ADUs shall be clearly accessory to the principal dwelling. Question about that, when given the local ADU definition, you could have a principal dwelling that is about 1,500 square feet or less, and an ADU that is 1,200 square feet. How do you clearly make that accessory to a 1,500 to comply with this section B if the square footages of the local ADU and the principal dwelling are extremely similar?
Yeah, I think
Right.
oh, sorry. So there's two permitting paths for this. So one would be administrative approval, and there's sections, criteria in the bylaw, and then there's a special permit. So if it's a special permit, there's additional criteria in the bylaw 10.38 that would be used. In terms of this specific one, I think, the scale is right. So it might not be as relevant if it's a larger principal dwelling, but because a local ADU can be allowed from, the way we're defining principal dwelling, it applies throughout this whole bylaw. So it could be from a single family home to a multi-unit building. And so then, the scale is, say, less important if it's a larger building. But, compatible still could mean, what's the overall height to width and massing and scale. So the proportions of height to width can still be important there in terms of scale, even if it's a principal dwelling of more than one unit. And to be clearly accessory, I think, to your point, it's something that would be interpreted either by staff or then by a zoning board of appeals. And so it could come down to, placement on the property, the mass of the building in terms of height of roof line or ridge line, its prominence on the property in terms of the street location. And so, to me, it's really then looking at a site plan and building design to see, is it really accessory in terms of its design and placement to the principal dwelling?
We might wonder if that's really important anymore, since we could see a proliferation of accessible dwelling units. And as Mandy just said, if it's similar in scale to the primary residence, I'm thinking of lots of houses exactly as she's talking about. We're essentially creating a duplex, and
Yay.
at this point, it doesn't really matter about the secondariness of that new unit.
Yeah, I mean, I think the planning board had discussed this. There was another one about having the stairs or entrances to the side or rear. And so they,
Yeah.
thought that that should be eliminated. They discussed this condition as well. And, we thought it's helpful. It's some guidance to staff. Is it necessary? I guess that's a question. So, we have sometimes complaints with chicken coops, being in the front yard, and what can we do about that? And, originally the thought was, well, if there isn't this provision and someone, had an ADU, it could be that they created an awkward site plan with ADU in front of the principal dwelling, right? Blocking the principal dwelling or the single family home right in the front yard in an odd arrangement. And so, if this, if it's only if it's a detached local ADU, shall it be accessory too? So, a contained or a attached ADU just looks like an possible addition to the principal dwelling. But if it's completely detached, have it designed in a way so that it is accessory. So maybe, just its relationship of entries to the principal dwelling and to the driveway and to the street is important. Not necessarily its location, but the way it's designed in its approach.
Thank you. Counselor Haneke, did that answer your question?
Sort of. I still don't. I mean, it answered the question. I don't think I agree with this. A couple of examples. So if I were to build an ADU, a detached ADU on my property, it has to be in the front yard, and it has to block a good portion of my main house, because that's the only place I can build given the wetlands regulations, and the 100-foot buffer zone and everything. And so, I just, and then another example is the lot behind mine that just got a special permit about a year ago for a detached ADU. I think there's 3 buildings actually on that property. There's a detached garage, the ADU, and the main house. And other than the garage, I'm not sure you'd actually know which one is, quote, the main house. And I'm not sure it really matters to know which one is, quote, the main house. They're all the same color. They're all the same siding. They're all, like, as long as the lot is designed, frankly, what I'm going to say doesn't even matter. It doesn't matter how the lot is designed to look in my mind, to others, because it's the owner that needs to like the look. I know that's a statement that many people will disagree with. But I guess I'm not seeing the need for the second sentence in this section. And the first sentence, appearance compatible with the principal dwelling. So does that mean that I've got a colonial style house on my lot? Does my ADU need to also be a colonial style, or could it be a Frank Lloyd Wright style modern dwelling? Or do I have to stick with, if I'm building a detached ADU, the style that is the main house? And why would I have to stick with the style that is the main house? Why couldn't I
Nate.
build a contemporary
Nate.
modern ADU based on?
Nate, let's hear from Nate.
Curious.
Yeah, no, I think they're good questions. And so, typically, when we were reviewing this, at the planning board, we said we don't look at the style of an addition. So say you're not building an accessory dwelling unit, you're just putting a large addition onto a single family home. If we leave it at a single family home for now, we don't really review it for its architectural style. If it's a different principal dwelling, depending on the permitting, right, then it does get reviewed, whether it's by staff or by a permitting board. I think, this is something that's been in the bylaw. We added it when we allowed accessory dwelling units by right. And so there was, some general conditions that, like I said, provided guidance to staff. And some of it was, right, it's a subjective, what does appearance and scale mean? And what's compatibility with the principal structure? And to me, that doesn't mean you have a colonial style house or a federal style house, you need a federal style ADU. But could someone interpret it that that's the way it means? Perhaps. I think compatibility is a little broader and more flexible. And so, to me, it's the appearance and scale. So if you have a small single family home, if we're saying that, or a small principal dwelling, and you'd like to do a 2-story ADU with a large parapet, and you're, having a 30-foot high ADU and your house has a ridgeline of 15 feet, to me, if it wouldn't meet this condition, this requirement. And so, that's why it's here. could someone use it to get down to those details and really say no to a project? Possibly, I think we'd apply it reasonably to an application.
Thank you. Kathy?
To me, I want to ask a separate question on something else, but I'll stay on this.
Yep.
The reviewer has a lot of discretion here. That's the way I mean, that's what Mandy is objecting to. And I think those that wrote this wording originally understood that there's discretion on both what does the word compatible mean, and clearly accessible. So one of the things that, just referring back, and we're just on local right now, since this is not protected. I know, Nate, I had you change the wording a little bit on the dimensions of what the local could be. So I thought the local, anything that is smaller than a protected, they might as well be protected. So it's clear that it should be larger than whatever the protected is. But in this case, a local, since now we have just purely up to 1,200, it could be bigger. To the extent we have little houses, it could be bigger than the principal restaurant, right? So there is no way it would look like it was clearly accessory if the original house was 800 square feet and now we're building 1,200 square feet. So I do want to revisit the planning board. Originally, someone wrote in 90% or up to, and I think it was supposed to read whichever is smaller, but right now, this is not defined relative to the size of the structure we're talking about at all. It's just, you can build it as big as this. And that I know on our committee there would be different views of this, but with Mandy's point, if it's bigger than the principal, there's no way it's going to look like it's accessory. It's just almost by definition, it will dominate. So it's like.
So I'm hearing several
Yeah.
people say that that second sentence, clearly accessory, really doesn't have the weight that it used to when this was, first allowed in the town of Amherst, and with concerns from everybody that you'd get things popping up wherever. I think I would also agree that second sentence no longer carries the weight that it once had, and we've already said that it needs to be generally compatible with the existing structure. That probably gives enough guidance. If there's somebody else that feels that we should hold on to these words, let's hear.
Jennifer has her hand up.
Jennifer.
Yeah, I'm okay losing the second sentence, but I just think it doesn't hurt to have the first sentence. And this is not self-interested. I live in a local historic district that will still have to continue even to go before the LHD. So you couldn't just put a cinder block box in the front of a house. But I just think, it's flexible. It's some guidelines. And I think in Amherst, what I'm seeing is most of the protected use ADUs will be built to rent to students. And so the owner's not building what's pleasing to the owner. The owner's building whatever's cheapest, so they, greatest return on investment. And maybe it's different where I live, where the lots are so small. If you had the accessory unit in the front, it would really be kind of an eyesore. But I guess there's an ADU going up, I always mention it, near me, which is practically touching the original house. The lot is so small. So I think in that case, so it's on Lincoln and Fearing. So it's going to look like a house next door, which is fine. But it's, I guess what I'm saying is, in that case, it's a corner lot. It's not going to look behind or in front. It's just going to look next door. But I would definitely, I think that it is just fine. And I think prefer to have some guidance that we want there to be some aesthetic consideration, because I think since so many of these are going to be investor properties, they're not really necessarily going to care about that.
Thank you. Great. Kathy.
Nate, can you go back up to the dimensions of the local?
Yeah, I'd like to go back where we actually started before we skipped down to 0115.
Well, but Pam, I want to go to that specific because it's related to this a little bit. So then you
Okay,
can
that's
go
fine.
back to the beginning.
Yeah, so
Okay.
the definition you mean, so
Yeah.
here we say is larger than the protected use ADU, but shall not be larger than 1,200 gross square feet. And it used to say, shall be, not larger than 1,200 square feet or 90% of the principal dwelling or whichever is smaller. And
So,
so, yeah,
this is and I pointed out, so part of this was changed because of Kathy, but I missed a second part of it. So what I was concerned of, if the protected use of ADU can't be more than 50%, up to 900. You could have a protected use that was quite small, and then the local comes along, and as long as it is somewhat bigger than the protected use ADU, we'd be fine with it. So I didn't want to restrict it to having to be 90. I didn't want it to say it has to be at least 90% of the principal use, make it be larger. So but shall not be larger than 90% or 1,200, whichever is smaller. I do think that wording is important. Otherwise, we're basically losing the definition of what's accessory, because it could be actually bigger than the principal. So I'd like to put back in. So I like larger in square feet than protected use, but shall not be larger than the minimum of 90% or 90% or 1,200, whichever is smaller. That wording. So we say it could be 600 square feet, or it could be name whatever the principal is.
If I could follow up with Nate, if Nate could explain to us though, why that percentage of the existing principal dwelling was removed in the first place.
yeah, I think there's, maybe two reasons. The planning board thought that the 90% just, wasn't necessary. They wanted to allow a larger accessory dwelling unit. Also using gross floor area. Typically that doesn't, that's the way it's defined. It includes things that aren't habitable space and not living space. So typically if you were to have a dwelling unit on a slab, say, and you have 900 gross square feet or 1,200 gross square feet, your living space will be smaller because, you'll have to have space for utilities, like a water heater or other things. And so your living space out of 1,200 square feet, if that were the instance, might be, 150 square feet less or something. And so the planning board felt using gross square feet, they didn't see the need for the 90% to limit it in that way. They thought, so at 90%, it's pretty similar in size to what could be a small principal dwelling. So they didn't think it was necessary, but, it would be parallel to what's up here. We say half the gross floor area, whichever is smaller. And so it would be, larger than the protected use ADU. And then, we could have some percentage, right? So, like it has a 90% or 1,200 square feet, whichever is smaller.
So can I just say, it's
Rob
not,
Laura has his hand up or had his hand
Oh,
up.
sorry,
just not
I don't see him. Yeah.
I just want to say, it's not accessory if it's bigger than the principal. That's what you think, we're losing the definition of what's accessory.
What difference does it make? Because if you build something larger than the original unit, then the original unit could be called accessory, and the new one would be the main building. It just doesn't seem worth arguing about.
Yeah, I think maybe that Rob was shaking his head. I think we've talked about this, that it's not semantics necessarily, but a builder could come in and figure out, well, I can build a large, say, an accessory structure. It's not an ADU, right? It doesn't have a kitchen. It's not really a habitable space. And then they could build something else, and then they could outfit the first structure with a kitchen and bath. And all of a sudden you've changed the equation of what comes first and what's what. And it, so, here the planning board felt like, so they did talk about this. Do they really want one or two ADUs on a property? And they really felt at the last hearing, and they talked about it previously too, that they like the idea of having a larger option. And their thought was that most homeowners who choose to do a local ADU, or a property owner who do a local ADU, there is an owner occupancy requirement. And it goes through, if it comes second, it's a special permit, that there will probably be fewer investor owned, or, fewer property owners who are going to decide to do two, after a protected use, to do a local ADU, because they're not, it's still costly and it's a project to do an ADU. So, if you did a local ADU first and then you did a protected use, there's still an owner occupancy requirement on the property. And so, the planning board thought that most property owners who do a local ADU and go through that process, it may actually do a protected use, but there may not be a lot of them who then do a protected use as the second ADU. And so they thought it was okay to have this larger square footage, just given the idea of flexibility. And it doesn't mean that you're going to always get to 1,200 square feet. It's the maximum. It's like whatever works. So given your dimensional standards, your lot size, your budget, you might have just a 1,100 square foot ADU, gross square feet. We are allowing bigger, but
I have actually done a follow-up on this, and we're not really talking about the protected use yet, but I guess I'm okay with not having a percentage of the square footage of the primary and leave it like we have it here in red. But as far as the protected use, why restrict it to, in this case, half the gross floor area of the principal dwelling? If, as the example was, you have a 1,500 square foot house,
It's the definition, Pam, that's the state definition.
I understand that, but it doesn't make sense. Why not just have the one that have up to 900 square feet, just like we have up to 1,200 square feet?
yeah, you can be more permissive than the regulation. So in that
Right.
instance, that's allowed. You're not, essentially then every protected ADU can get to 900 square feet. So you're not limiting their size. Yep. So that's a change. So most communities haven't taken that approach. It's just written the maximum amount, but we could.
Does anybody else feel that, the difference of 150 square feet, which is exactly the heating closet that you're talking about, does that bother anybody to just say up to 900 square feet?
Yes, it bothers me to take that out completely.
So
I
you're
would vote-
okay.
I would
I
vote-
agree. I agree.
I would completely vote against
Yeah,
against doing that. I'm okay with doing what the state has told we have to do.
yeah, I would too.
Okay. Rob, you were gonna say
But
something
can
earlier.
Pam, I do have another question. Just when you say it has to be on slab, otherwise it counts against you. I have seen, actually, two of my brothers built a house which had a 5-foot high crawl space underneath where they put all their utilities. So we're not going to count that. The state talked about they had a definition of the height of the thing before it was called a basement. So you could build it doesn't have to be on slab. I raised this point last time, but construction wise, and out in the West, they often don't put basements in, but they do put this under piece to put the hot water heater and some things so that they're not using up the space of the house. So I just want to say, I don't think that is impossible to do in New England. And you could have it insulated and not just be on slab. So I think construction-wise, that option is still, in the way the state has defined it, it wouldn't count against you for the square footage of the house. That's the way I read it in terms of the ceiling height.
And let's let Nate respond to that.
Yeah, I scrolled up to the definition. No, Kathy's right. I just used the slab for example, so that we're working with, 1,200 square feet of what people would see as the building, above grade. And so the definition of gross floor area is the sum of all areas of compliant building height pursuant to the building code, including basements, lofts, intermediate floor tiers, and then it goes on. It says, but excluding crawl spaces, garage parking areas, attics, enclosed porches, and similar spaces. And so, the basement counts. So if someone were to build a protected use ADU, they're not going to build a basement likely, because now this counts towards their gross floor area to that half the floor area or 900 square feet. But they could build crawl space, which still could have 6 5 foot, 6 foot ceilings, it can't be of compliant building height, right? So there's a height requirement that, between a crawl space and a basement. So they'd build what they could, and they could still have, their gross square feet above grade. I just use the slab as an example, so someone's not questioning what's happening, in the basement or crawl space. But
Thank you. Counselor Haneke.
So I would support Pam's suggestion of getting rid of half the gross floor area and just making it everything under 900. And then everything 900 to 1200. Anything that simplifies reading of this and figuring out, in some sense, I'm for. I'm just curious. What is a compliant ceiling height? How high can a ceiling height go in a quote basement to be considered, or an attic, before it's counted in gross floor area? Just out of curiosity.
yeah, so I'll just say quickly, because we include it includes basements of compliant ceiling height, it doesn't mean it's unfinished or finished. So in New England, or in Massachusetts particularly, a lot of structures have basements, right? This is even like a rubble foundation with a dirt floor. If it's compliant height, which I think is 6'6", it counts towards their gross floor area of their principal dwelling. So most structures will be able to get to the 900 square feet because they have a basement. And the attic piece, it says excluding crawl spaces, garage spaces, or attics. Attics are a little tricky. So, at some point, if you have a tall enough attic and you finish it and you make it finished space, at some proportion, if you finish most of it, then it's no longer considered attic, it's considered finished space. So say you have a slope and you get right down to the very corner. So it's like, 6 foot high attic, and it goes all the way up to 12 foot high peak, right? So you have a triangle space. You can enclose that and make a room out of it. And if a third of the space of the attic space becomes finished space, or more than a third, then it's not considered attic anymore. It's considered living space. So it's a variable calculation. So for most parts, attics are attics. There could be some homeowner who's like, oh, I need to get to a larger protected ADU, so I'm gonna, it seems silly that they would then finish their attic to get an extra few hundred square feet, especially if they have their unfinished basement that counts towards their gross floor area. But so an attic can be both, an attic, or could be considered part of this gross square foot calculation.
Rob.
Thanks. I just want to clarify something there that Nate just said, that, an attic that does meet that criteria, less than a third of the floor area below, and becomes finished, is still an attic. It's a finished attic. So we have unfinished attic and finished attic. And that was our concern with the state's language, is that you get this 900 square foot ADU and the attic is exempt. You actually could get another 300 square feet up above
Good.
and have a 1,200 square foot protected ADU. And that's why we were resistant to putting in the gross floor area and not using habitable space from the very beginning until, we found that we had to, based on Attorney General comment. Thank you.
So this allows us to say my concern is somebody builds the protected ADU with an attic space, and you approve it because we can't include attic space. But 2 years later, they come back and they quietly finish their attic space, and they pop somebody else up in the attic. That, if they don't get a building permit, that completely overrides the process.
Could happen.
They'd have to provide stairs or access up there, but
I'm going to go to Jennifer, and then I've got a comment about gross floor area itself.
Okay, since we can't impose any occupancy limits, and most of these are going to be rented to students, if they finish off the third floor, maybe they don't finish it off. It can still look pretty sketchy. So we're talking about 5 occupants, because you only need 100 square feet for each additional occupant. Pat, you're shaking your head. You do not live near student houses. But this ADU, and this is just one example, it's a small house. It's always been
Yes,
rented
I
to
do.
Not like not.
Can Jennifer
But anyway,
please
just to
let-
say,
let
the
her finish.
concern is that, I mean, how many? Yeah, I mean, there's a real concern in town. I think most people in town, who live where this could happen next door to them, really don't want 10 people, living next door with 10 different cars. And the owner, this is not providing housing for families. They will, you could have 8 students. There's one around the corner from me because it's a duplex, but it's a small house. They're charging $8,200 a month. But so I guess that's my concern. Like, at what point, because it doesn't require much square footage for an additional occupant.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
so-
you're concerned with the square footage overall and allowing up, just basically allowing 900 square feet is more because there's the opportunity for another bedroom or something like that.
Right, you can
Is it-
already, I think, have 4 people in 900 square feet legally, maybe. And so you finish off the basement, you have 6, plus the 4 in the primary house.
Yeah, so I was going to jump in. We do limit, the number of parking spaces. So we're trying to mitigate, having, paved areas. So, a maximum of 3 parking spaces for the accessory dwelling unit, whether that's local or protected. That may or, that may help. But yeah, I think, the issue of number of occupants is usually something zoning doesn't regulate. It's a really tricky thing. And so although we have it in our zoning bylaw, staff in the town has always found it difficult to enforce. Zoning doesn't typically get into, the occupancy use of a structure in terms of number of occupants. And so, there's other general bylaws if it becomes, a nuisance house, or if there's things that can be done, that can be managed. But, if there's, I understand what
Now
you're
we
saying. It's
have the
just, but we can't stop, so if someone has a protected ADU and they want to have 5 occupants and it's managed well, you may never know there's 5 occupants. It comes down to the management. I know it's a different equation in terms of affordability of housing and who it's serving. And it may not have been what the state was anticipating, but, typically zoning doesn't say, well, you can't have, more than so many occupants, or we try to, limit it. We have been doing that, but it's a really difficult thing. In the states now saying we can't do it for protected ADU.
Right, so that's what I'm
Yeah,
saying. If there can be all these rooms, I should say, again, getting back to the ADU block from me, they are not having any parking spaces, which actually the residents prefer, because that whole lot would be paved. So they'll still be building ADUs and housing, for students, maybe more, even if they don't have a parking lot.
Let's get to parking in a bit. We'll just keep going through the document here. So
Pam,
we
my
don't
hand is up.
see, Kathy, your hand is up. I was trying to make a comment. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, but it was on this topic, so if you wanted to get to parking, I can come
No,
back.
we're
to
not
it.
talking about parking yet. We need to get through item by item, and Nate's explaining the changes that were agreed upon that were different than our last version. So Kathy, do you have something still about gross floor
I just had
area?
a question. Jennifer started to say how much square footage you have to have for the first human being, how much for the second. Could someone just tell me what that is? This is the state minimum, not what the town says, right? The state
Oh.
minimum.
Yeah, it's state building and plumbing code. So it's right.
Yeah, it's 150 square feet for the first occupant and 100 square feet for each additional occupant. And that's state sanitary codes or health regulations. There are also minimum square footages for bedrooms, minimum square footages for bathrooms and kitchens. But I guess to someone's point, I don't remember who it was, is that a very small unit, 400, 500, 600 square feet, can physically house 4 occupants legally according to our code. So that's not really the issue that we have to try to deal with here.
Okay, thank you. That was very useful.
Mandy, and then I have a comment about gross floor area.
Oh, mine's on the local accessory dwelling unit definition, if you want to stick to gross floor area.
Okay, yeah, while we're right here. So gross floor area, my concern is that when I go to Mass General Law, Chapter 25A, Section 20, its description is total floor areas contained within a building measured to the exterior face of the external walls. In other words, you just take your measurement at the perimeter of the house. I think that's a much more logical measurement than going to interior walls because, you know, unless you get a drawing that tells you it's a, you know, 4-inch stud wall or a 6-inch stud wall, why not just go to the perimeter? Does Rob have an issue with that, making it simpler?
Well, the
So-
state has,
Yep. Go ahead,
yes,
Nate.
sorry. The Attorney General has said to use the definition in the regulation. And so I think, you know, the question would be if you went to exterior, are you then somehow being more restrictive because the way then you're measuring the principal dwelling or the accessory dwelling unit? And so they've, you know, the AG has said a few times, just basically use this definition. So other
And it's
communities
the-
have,
Okay, so this is the mandated definition. It doesn't match state law, which is what's really weird about it.
The ADU changed it, Pam. ADU made specific, because they used to use habitable as a word, and that's gone in this ADU.
Counselor Haneke.
Okay, Pam's question brought another one on with the definition of gross floor area. If it follows the regulations, do we really want to set it out like this with the strict wording, or do we just want to reference the that gross floor area shall be the definition in whatever it is, something CMR, 720 CMR, whatever, 760 CMR, whatever. Just in case the regulations change, we wouldn't then have to go back and modify the bylaw if we just reference the CMRs for gross floor area. And frankly, same with protected use. If we're copying the definition exactly, do we just want to just say protected use ADU shall be the definition provided in MGL Chapter 40A, Section 1A? So those questions there. For local ADU, just a short question. The adding of the first clause, an ADU that is not a protected use ADU, makes the whole thing read weird. Local accessory dwelling use, an ADU that is not a protected use ADU and shall be self-contained. It's not really like a sentence. So I was curious if we could just replace the and shall be with a semicolon and then the provided that it is a self-contained residential unit, or something like that, or 2 sentences, something that makes it read less weird.
sure, we could do that. Again, the Attorney General has asked communities to specify. So, it could be that our definition we say is larger than a protected use. So we may have already have it covered. I think we were being explicit that it's not a protected ADU, so there's no question, but we could rework that.
Can you
And-
take out if you could just, it is not a protected ADUs, because you say later in the paragraph that it's smaller than.
I'm fine with saying that it is not a protected use ADU. It's and
Oh, okay.
shall be just,
Yeah.
Just reads weird. Like, I think it could read an ADU that is not a protected use ADU, provided that it is a self-contained residential dwelling. Something like that.
I mean, we could make it 2 statements and just say, just an ADU is not a protected use ADU, and then start a new sentence, or we could do the way you're suggesting.
Yeah. Just something that makes it read less weird.
Right. And then just quickly, in terms of the definitions, I think it's helpful to have these in here. The state doesn't define it exactly like this for protected use ADU. We've kind of combined the regulation and general law here. And similarly for gross floor area, I just think we're probably always going to be referring to it because it's not the gross floor area that says in the building code, or as Pam just mentioned. And so to me, to have the description of it written out here is
Yeah.
very helpful, because I think applicants and everyone is going to be using it. If we just said gross floor area, I don't know how many people are actually then going to go find the CMR, and they might look in building code and determine it differently than how it is applied here. I don't know, Rob, if you have any specific comments on the local accessory dwelling unit. I don't mind just having it be 2 statements for now.
Rob?
No, I have no concerns with that. In either way, two statements is certainly nice and clear and easier to read.
Great, so we've gotten through, that makes sense, it clears things up a little bit. Let's keep moving then.
And just to go back, there was the question about, this size description. Do we have, the 90% or whichever is smaller, or do we just say bigger than a protected and not more than 1,200?
It sounds like I'm the only one that wanted to put the 90% back
Yeah.
in. So I will cede that ground. I just have one comment. I mean, Mandy was trying to streamline the wording a little bit. Since the definition of ADU, whether it's protected or local, is a self-contained unit, residential unit, blah, 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 blah. Saying it twice has just always seemed to me to make this longer. But maybe there's no artful way of doing it. I just want to say an ADU is a self-contained da-da-da-da. A protected use has this square footage, a local use has this square footage. That's the key difference between the two of those. And it's a structural thing that I find reading the same wording exactly the same is, I find redundant. But if it's certainly clear, it's just repetitive. I think the wording is identical up until we get to the point about dimensions.
It is, yeah. I mean, some of it would be if someone is only looking at one or the other, then it's, the language is contained there. I think it is, how you would, if you want to structure it differently, to me, then that becomes it's almost like a sub definition of one. We're really defining the local ADU as this, right? So it's.
All I'm saying is an ADU is the following, and then we have a protected ADU and a local ADU, and they differ only by the dimensions. That's all and then some how you do it. But if this has been the plan, what the staff has done, and it's been this consistently the same all the time, and I just don't quite understand why it needs to repeat itself. But if you think drafting wise, that's the way you got to do it, I'm okay with it. It's just repetitive.
Well, the question might be, is there an actual definition of ADU anywhere else in our bylaws? And I think probably now not. They're here in paragraph C and D. Is that right?
Right.
Yeah, to me, I would say an ADU is the following. This bylaw allows two. One is protected, it has this. This is local, it has this. I would just do it that way. But as I said, it's just because I find I'm reading the same words in both places. An ADU is a thing, and then there are two different types that we're allowing to exist. It's purely a flow in the way I read it. I find myself trying to read what's the difference between the two, and it comes down just to the size.
Yeah. Councilor Haneke.
Three minor things while we're up here in this section. Section C, the comma at the very end between this and section shouldn't be there.
Yeah.
It's just an error. In D, the comma in the section of little 2 that is after the word but shouldn't be there.
You didn't even read it.
It's gone now too, so you don't have to read it.
And then I'm still curious why we haven't put these definitions in alpha order. Local ADU should really be B, not D.
Yeah, we could do that. That's something that hadn't been done, and the planning board didn't.
Or if we followed Kathy's suggestion, it would be ADUs that would come first, and then subheading.
And can I just respond to that, Mandy? If you put them in the reverse order, and the first one refers to the second one, it becomes very odd. I know you like in alpha order, but local refers to the first. And if you haven't even said what the first is, it becomes odd to me to read a definition that depends on something I haven't read yet. So
Uh,
it's structurally, local is defined relative to protected. So,
I mean, I get that, but there's plenty of definitions since our bylaw puts definitions in alpha order. In the definition section, there's plenty of definitions that are like that within the zoning bylaw because we typically use alpha order, and if we're going to be consistent, we should use alpha order.
well, you know, the state in its CMR, the first thing is a definition of what an ADU is. Later, they define what a protected ADU is. So they define the thing first, and we've got two. So I don't want to belabor it because I don't care about alpha order very much. And I know you want to be consistent, but to have something refer to the thing that it hasn't been mentioned yet is conceptually odd to me. And I think, Nate, I'm the one who had you flip it just because I thought, but I don't care one way or the other about that.
It's all Kathy's fault. Jennifer.
Yeah, I don't mean to be kind of slow on the uptake here, but returning to Kathy's comment about the 90%, that is pertaining to a protected use ADU can be up to 900 square feet. It has, where does the 90% fit into?
That was for local.
Yeah, so
Okay.
the area that's highlighted here, I would say is larger than a protected use ADU, but shall not be larger than 90% of the gross floor area of the principal dwelling or 1,200 square feet, whichever is smaller.
I would like to see that. I agree with Kathy. I thought that.
I think at one point we had discussed though that the 90%, well, it has to be larger. So the question is, what if you have a small principal dwelling and you actually can't get to the 90%, then you may never actually be able to build a local ADU. It would always be a protected. So even if someone wanted to have a local, they couldn't get that, over that 90% threshold.
Well, why not?
Yeah.
Well, so if we say whichever is smaller, so if,
You
if they have
mean no, say it's a 900 square feet principal dwelling and the protected can't be bigger than 450.
I guess
then-
you're right. So I get, okay, right. So I guess you can get over that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I agree with Kathy. I don't we need to go to a vote, but I would like to see that remain in the language.
So how do we proceed if five of us don't agree on a change? So far, we've only been making a change when the five of us agree. It's purely it's a question.
Yes. And I don't have a great answer. We could do a show of hands for a change and then make a note in our report that, this was a conversation.
In the past, if people have cared enough, there's been a vote and whatever won is what went through in the final vote, right? And then you had your final vote as to whether you supported what it was. But yeah, I mean, you can propose an amendment and see if that proposal passes. And if it does, then in theory it goes in. And then
so-
when we vote on a
Amanda,
recommendation of the
you're
whole
saying
thing,
that if I want to make this change, I propose an amendment, we take a vote on that, and then
I
Uh,
can see all five of us now. So if for those who support adding back in the 90% gross floor area of the principal dwelling or 1,200, whichever is smaller, raise your hand if you want to see the 90% back in. And I can't see Pat
you want the
anymore.
raise hand, you want the raise hand signal?
Yeah.
Oh,
Oh, that'd be great. Yeah. So that's 2, 3 that don't care to have the 90% back in. Sounds like that doesn't carry any water.
And so what I would like in the report, Pam, if we can see it, I would like to say that we discussed that. And
Yep.
it was 3 against 2.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I guess, as we're looking at this, I think Pam, you had asked earlier about, do we like the idea of having 2 ADUs or just the protected? I don't know if that was ever really answered. We can work our way through. Like I said, most of the conditions and the language is the same. In the planning board, they circled around it a bit and they landed on having 2, knowing that if they went through this, one document, that as long as, what they're changing, we'd reflect it in both. So right now, there's been only a few minor changes that if we went to a protected use version would need to be updated.
Thank you. Thank you. This is a good point. Otherwise, we spend a lot of time on something we may not need to. Kathy, your hand is up.
Oh,
but
sorry,
I'm-
no, it's down.
Okay, so let's talk specifically then about having 2 types of ADU available to Amherst. One is a local ADU, one is a protected use ADU. For those who support having both a local and a protected ADU, let's raise your hand. You could do a raise hand on the screen,
So
or you can.
I have conditions on it.
Okay, so yes, local, but.
Yeah, I mean, I support ADUs up to 1,200 square feet. So if that requires having both, because the committee wouldn't be willing to modify protected use to go up to 1,200 square feet, then I support both. But if the committee would support modifying protected use to be 1,200 square feet, then I would go with just one. But I'm getting the feeling that that would not be supported by the committee, so that's why I'm raising my hand on having both.
Yeah, so the planning board, and just to talk about it, that was also suggested, just having a protected use, but making it be larger, even up to 1,200 or more than what we allow now. And what that does is all the existing ADUs essentially become protected use ADUs, and then the owner occupancy or certain other conditions may not be enforceable. And then moving forward, you'd have one larger protected ADU on a property. And the planning board didn't like that option, and they stuck with the 2 here.
Okay, so I didn't see, I think I saw on that those who support
There
a
were 3,
local,
there were 3 yeses, Pam.
okay, thank you.
And
So
by
Jennifer, just to
virtue
make
of
sure,
not yeses and 2 nos.
okay, but just to make sure, Jennifer, you don't support having both a local ADU and with all of its restrictions and the protected, in addition to the protected.
I would prefer not. I mean, I feel, but I wouldn't. When it comes to the council, if it's not there, I will vote for it. I won't not vote for the ADU bylaw because of that. I mean, I do, because there's the owner occupancy, and because I guess I will say I do. What I learned today, because I wasn't at the last meeting, is that the second has to go before the ZBA, so there would be a butter notification, and so I would support both in that case.
Okay. And Pat, I don't see Pat, if you want to just describe your feelings on it.
I raised my
Yes.
hand in support of, yeah. I was one of the
okay.
3 supporting it.
Okay. And Kathy, then your reason to not support a local and a protected?
I think it's complicated. It's easy to understand protected, and I would rather see what happens with that. And my understanding is the existing locals, if they're larger than this definition, would still have the owner occupancy in their deed. So I think a simple version's better. But, I see if there are 4 people saying yes, I'm not going to vote against this at the council if there are 2. This is not a deal breaker for me.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
I mean, I brought that up with the planning board. Would we want to, move incrementally and only have one? And, they did discuss it, but I think there was enough planning board members who liked the idea of this larger local ADU. And so they didn't want to just, keep it to the protected, and they weren't willing to make the protected bigger. So they understood that, for some property owners and applicants, up to 1,200 gross square feet is really nice, right? So you can have a larger
Yeah.
unit for a family, for whatever reason, but just have a better living space. So you can have, a little bit more room to move around.
Okay, let's move on to section 50113. This is general requirements. We started on some of these, but we didn't get very far.
Yeah, there haven't been many changes. I mean, all ADUs will be located on the same property as the principal dwelling. There shall be no more than one local ADU and one protected on the same lot as the principal dwelling. As we say here, all ADUs are exempt from lot area and family requirements of table 3. So this was just capitalized. That's what we do right now for ADUs. A protected use ADU can't be used towards like a density calculation. So a local ADU, I think Kathy at one point had asked, could a local ADU, would you need additional lot area? And you could write in something about that, but we don't now as an accessory use. So that one requirement of the dimensional standards doesn't apply. No additional driveway or separate driveway curb cut to serve any ADU shall be permitted unless allowed by Public Works. Parking plan shall be submitted and approved by the building commissioner in accordance with the design and landscape standards of section 7 of the zoning bylaw. And then there's a few more. If the principal dwelling and or any ADU will be rented.
Hold on.
yeah.
I put my hand up
Oh,
for
sorry,
E. So this is a question to you and Rob. Given that it does say it's submitted to the building commissioner in accordance with design and landscape standards of section 7. This topic came up a little bit ago with Strong Street and section 7.104, the dimensional standards. It says in there that the ZBA or SPR may allow small car parking 8x16 for 50% of the lot's spaces. And so that means that it seems to me that the building commissioner can then also guide people toward a smaller parking stall space than the standard commercial parking requires. And I wanted to double check with Rob that in fact this interpretation of parking 7104 holds enough weight that in fact the building commissioner can direct the size and scale of these parking lots. Is that true, Rob?
Unfortunately, no. And it's, one of those markings in the bylaw where we say we'd love to change someday and give the permit granting authority authorization to do that, because the way this is written, it's just if there's a zoning board or planning board action being taken. So,
rather than the authority in general.
Right. If it's wherever the bylaw says permit granting authority, that gives me when it is something that I'm dealing with it as administrative approval, gives me the authority to make that decision. But this is one that it doesn't.
I don't like that.
Yeah, it comes up quite often because I would like to have that flexibility because it makes sense a lot of the time. So it's like, again, it's on the list of things we should change in Article 7 sometime.
So if Article 7 were modified to say the permit granting authority and or administrative authority?
It just needs to say permit granting authority because by definition that includes me.
Okay.
And we've done that throughout the bylaw in various places where we make more recent updates. There's inconsistency where it says permit granting board, special
Yeah.
permit granting authority, or permit granting authority. So ideally everything would be permit granting authority someday that isn't, statutorily required to go to a board or committee.
Got it. So you do not have the flexibility. Thank you. Let's go to Jennifer.
Is this where I can address parking, or since?
There's another thing farther on about the number of parking spaces.
Okay, then I'll hold my,
That's
yeah,
general
that would be the
requirements.
place to make my comment. Okay.
Okay, keep going, Nate.
All right, yeah, so we're here. If the principal dwelling and or any ADU will be rented, it shall be rented in accordance with the residential rental property bylaw, the general bylaws. And so that was, it used to reference, the specific section, and it wasn't worded this way.
So I have a question on that one.
Mhm.
And we have somebody that has raised a hand. I don't recognize the name. So my question on F, because it refers directly to the residential rental property. In rental registration property, it includes trash, parking, management plan, occupancy. So if this is in fact regulated by our rental bylaws, it does say in there that no exemption from the application of rental registration bylaws is allowed. So does that not hold our occupancy requirement directly? Does that not link it directly to our rental registration and then our bylaws? I'm
No,
looking at Rob.
Yeah, I don't think so. I think the occupancy restriction is something that's not enforceable. So even though it's registered through the program and complying with all other aspects of the rental registration, which will either be driven by state law or deemed reasonable, we know that the occupancy limit has been decided that it's not a reasonable regulation.
That's for ADUs. Can we go back to your statement that occupancy is not enforceable?
An occupancy limit would not be enforceable in a protected ADU.
Okay. Is it enforceable in the town of Amherst through our rental registration bylaw?
We do it every day.
Okay,
I mean,
Thank you.
it's never been challenged, but we do it.
thank you. That makes me happy. Jennifer and then Kathy.
Yeah, there is a hand raised in the audience. I don't know, will you get back to it?
I would be happy to pause and take,
Since no one was when you at the
okay, yeah, there was nobody in the audience earlier. If everybody's okay, I'm going to go to the public and ask if Taryn would like to speak.
Is this the official public
This is
comment
the
period?
official public comment period on
Thank you.
this.
For the
Thank you.
public hearing.
Yes.
We are in a public hearing.
Okay, hi, everyone. And I'm not sure if this is the time to talk about this, but since I have to leave soon and you called on me, I think I will. So my name is Taryn LaRaja. I live at 7 Strong Street in Amherst. And I just wanted to kind of weigh in on the parking. I know, Rob, I've written to you about the concerns, and Pam and Jennifer, you were CC'd on it, about the, next door to us. It's already been approved. We completely understand about the AUD being approved, but we are dismayed that it was allowed to have, paved over the backyard and now there's going to be one parking spot in a garage and 4 in the backyard for, it is a tiny lot on the corner of Strong and East Pleasant. And we're trying to work with the neighbor and talk with him, ask him at the very least not to pave over, but to have, a permeable surface so that water can run in instead of on our properties. And I will say, I am also a landlord, and we own the property that's next door and connects in our backyard at 265 East Pleasant Street. And I just wanted to say, as a landlord, we have never had trouble renting to students when we say we do not like a lot of cars. There's only 2 in our parking plan, which we've never fought to change. There's only 2 spots, even though the size of the property is 3/4 of an acre. And last year, if the past 2 years, we've had students who there were 1 car between the 4 of them. This year there are 2. And we definitely get market rate. So the idea that, the town has to approve of all kinds of parking spots and, you know, to support businesses and land. I'm like, no, you just need to say, we live across from the campus. We are right next to a bus stop, and like, there aren't cars for everybody. And that's where I know, like, I'm hearing maybe there are certain things like you can't tell people what to do in their backyards, and you can't, but I'm like, if this is a business and this is a landlord, like, I do think as a town, we can be doing things to just stop the parking. Already on the corner of East Pleasant and Strong across the street, there are constantly tons of cars. And I just think it should be enforced that, like, no more than 4 cars. And like, I don't know, go park at Wildwood's, go like tell your friends to carpool over, Uber, whatever. I am really unhappy about how cars are totally changing our neighborhood. And it's been exponential in the last few years on Strong Street and around our neighborhood. And I just urge all of you to do whatever you can to limit parking and reassure landlords you can still get renters, and it's not going to end up costing you money. And if anything, I just have also noticed that those students tend to be really hardworking and busy and walking back and forth to campus all the time. So it's win-win all around for everybody. So I guess that is my one kind of main point. Is I get that these ADUs are you know, allowed, and we have to have them by the state, but I do think that we can do something about limiting the parking. And I hope that you do everything you can to do that, so that we do not become just a town of paved over backyards and parking lots.
Thank you very much. I'm glad you called in.
Thank you.
And I'm glad someone noticed that your hand was up. Because I couldn't see it from where I was. I think that ends public comment. We're back to counselor questions and considerations. Am I frozen?
No, but Mandy's hand is up.
Oh, okay. It was like totally quiet for a second. Counselor Haneke, please, and then Jennifer.
Thank you. The public commenter, Taryn, makes a good point. Parking minimums in typical zoning, when you think about zoning changes now, are going out of favor. I support parking minimums going out of favor, but what's coming into favor is parking maximums. And that's what we have here with no more than 3 on-site parking spaces. But the question is, do we need to allow 3? Should that number be lower than 3? Should it be 2? Should it be 1? Why is it 3? Why was 3 chosen for each ADU? That's not 3 total on a lot. That's 3 for the ADU and whatever the principal dwellings also have. So should we be considering a different number that's maybe lower than 3?
Excellent question. Jennifer.
I completely agree. Particularly if it's within a half mile, I think that of public transportation, that I would support limiting it to 1. And I have to say, again, talking about the ADU near me, the next door neighbors came to the local historic district meeting when it was being discussed, and they had no objection to the ADU. And it turns out that the owner didn't want to have to build up to 3 parking spaces. And the abutters totally supported that. The concern was the paving over the entire lot. So I think, you know, and this is a location near public transportation, 2 blocks from campus, I would support 1 if it is in with a certain radius of public transportation. And I think just to reach our climate action goals, so again, on this property I'm talking about, there's already parking spaces for 4. But with, you know, this new legislation, we do run the risk of just paving over green space. And again, when it's close to public transportation, I don't think that's the direction we want to be moving in.
Okay, thank you. And so Nate, we're talking about item I, yeah, Kathy.
I totally support going to one. Mandy said maybe two, and Jennifer did one. So I don't know whether we want to stop here and say one, because this is relative to providing a space for an ADU, and I am fine with saying one. I just want to make one comment, and we can't fix it here, that up in North Amherst, and this has been objected to by one of the people who runs the apartment building, to avoid the cost of leasing a parking space, there's a truck that is 24 hours a day parked on the street. So at some point, we need to deal with streets being, and it's, there's not a, you can't park overnight sign or anything. This particular street doesn't have any restrictions. So it's right outside of the big beacon thing, and there's just one truck. It's always there. And the commercial owner of all the shops has complained more than once about it to me and also to the town, and the town said, we can't do anything. There's no restriction on that street. It's on Coles Road, the narrow. So at some point, I think we need to deal with that in the TSO world. You know, to what extent do we allow overnight parking on small streets? But I totally think going to one would be fine.
I think the change to allowing on-street parking was by the first council. I think they passed that. Pat.
I do not support one. I live in a single family home. I have 2 cars for 2 people. Each of us has separate lives, even though we've been together 40 some years. And my driveway is not paved over. It has stone in it. There are lots of options. But it's perfectly reasonable. The other piece I want to add to this is I live near a bus stop. However, given what condition my body is in terms of walking and standing and doing things like that, I can't use the bus. I used to walk to town, and then I started taking the bus, but I can't now because I can't afford the amount of maneuvering I have to do. It's much easier for me to have a car parked near where I have gone. So you, a lot of people seem to believe that the fear of students and occupancy by students needs to drive zoning. And that's really sad because you're eliminating a great many people who are downsizing, who are doing a lot of things that don't match up with your narratives about students. And saying you can have only one parking spot, why aren't we saying it then to a single family home? Why do we have only certain rules because we're fearsome? Nah, wrong use of the word. We have some fear. I cannot support that decision.
Yeah, I just want to jump in quickly. So we're saying no more than 3 on-site parking spaces. In the way the bylaw addresses, say a parking space compared to a driveway or a drive aisle is different. So someone could still have a driveway, and you can use that to park. And so this is really, dedicated parking spaces.
I understand that.
No, I know I'm not saying one way or the other.
I'm sorry, Nate.
I just want to clarify for everyone so that if you do have a driveway, this isn't including a driveway. It's really the parking space. We have this in there. We liked having the housing subcommittee like this idea. I will say too, it's one of those things kind of like the occupancy piece. It's difficult to enforce or to determine. Typically, depending on how a product is permitted, we don't really see when parking's added, right? Someone could add, could repave their driveway and add some additional pavement without necessarily going through any permitting. Having it in here though is a mechanism that can then be used if someone reports it or through enforcement. So I just want to also just clarify the difference between a drive aisle and a parking space. So
Thank you. Yeah, Jennifer, and then me, and then Kathy.
In the way I understand it, the state's intent was to make it as easy as possible for the protected use ADUs to be built. So they were saying you can't require an excessive number of parking spaces because that could be a deterrent and add an expense to the property owner. So, and what we are doing by, allowing up to 3 is saying, well, is the state wanted to put a floor and we're putting a ceiling. And we're not talking about only having one parking space on the property. It's an accessory dwelling unit. So there's already a house there that has parking. So, and I think we have to deal with the reality of what is. There are, in my neighborhood, small lots, small houses. There are right now, because we not supposed to have more than 4 unrelated in a single dwelling, there are often 4 cars for 4 residents. And to add more cars to that is not, I think, the trajectory we want to be going in, especially if you're within a half a mile of public transportation. So someone who has a disability and can't walk or walk to public transportation, there is still parking available between the primary and accessory dwelling unit. We know that backyards that's already started will be paved over, and I think we should do what we can to mitigate it and not to accommodate it.
Thank you. I was going to support for letter I that there shall be no more than 2 on-site parking spaces. I think if I were to move into the accessory dwelling unit, yes, like Pat, we have 2 vehicles, 2 adults. And I think that's pretty reasonable. If they decide to put 4 people in this accessory dwelling unit, too bad. You're going to have to do, as Taryn said, you may need to carpool and share. In the sentence, the rest of the sentence, though, it says, so I'd like to see 3 go to 2. And then it says, and in accordance with CMR, no additional parking space shall be required for protected ADU. And I think that's a little confusing because it sounds like no additional parking above and beyond the 3 that we're allowing. So I'd like to see that changed and just say no parking space shall be required for protected use located within 1/2 mile of a commuter, or only 1 additional parking space shall be required. So do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, I
It's
do.
a
I think,
it's a run-on sentence.
I mean, if we could just, if we did this, so right, the regulations, if the ADU is located within a half mile of we say a rail station or bus stop, you can't require a parking space. And so, Jennifer, you were right that, some communities were going to use parking as the Achilles heel of an ADU and say, well, you have to provide 2 or 3 parking spaces, and you can't, sorry, you can't do your protected ADU. And so the state's saying, no, here's, within this distance, you can't require any off-site parking, essentially, or on-site parking.
So how many people are in favor of going from 3 to 2?
You want us to use the hand button?
Yeah, I had my hand up to make some comments.
Oh, okay. And then go to Councilor Haneke.
Well, well, I guess, Mandy, do you want to make your comment first, or do you want to vote on?
Yeah,
3 to
let's let her make
Yeah,
a comment.
Go ahead.
I think I could go to 2. I know I'm the one that brought this conversation forward, but listening and thinking, I think I could go to 2. There's no way I could go to 1. This section applies to both protected use and local ADUs, and locals can go up to 1,200 square feet, which you have to reasonably assume have at least 2 bedrooms, if not more. Probably 3. Probably 4. But
No,
logically, well, logically at least 2. At 1,200 square feet. I think it would be rare for a 1,200 square foot unit to have only 1 bedroom. And so I think a ceiling of 2 could work. If we're dealing with protected use only ADUs and moved this down to protected use, I would definitely support 2 for that. It's the local ADU that gives me a little pause maybe on going down to 2 just because there's that extra square footage there. But I think I could support 2. I wonder if the second clause of this that was added should actually be deleted from here and put under protected use ADU 5.0114 because that only applies to protected use ADUs. So having it in this section that applies to both sets of ADUs makes no sense. And then you could add it as a C that says, you know, in accordance with whatever, no additional shall be, no parking space shall be required for a protected use ADU located within, or take whatever the regulation, if we're copying the regulation, which we are sort of here, just take the regulation language and just dump it into 114 as C. And get rid of it under I, to me makes more sense than keeping it here and trying to reword it. I do agree with Kathy that the no additional is just weird as it's connected to that clause.
So yeah, I moved it. I think that works. Now it's under the protected use and where am I? So I'm highlighting in yellow just the major changes from the planning board and then just to see, so then, you know, it would just read there shall be no more than, well, it says 3 on-site parking spaces provided for any ADU. And then the rest of it is now in accordance with 760 CMR, no parking space shall be required for a protected use ADU located within half a mile of a commuter rail station or bus stop.
So on C that you just created,
Mhm.
it says no parking space shall be required. So that's like, we can't force them to, but if they decide they want to or whatever, then they should be able to ask for one.
Right. I think some communities, you know, what I've seen in the, you know, the Attorney General's review, some would say every ADU needs to have 2 parking spaces or 1 parking space. And they would say you can't require that of a protected use within a half mile. And so I think that was there, you know, I think some communities actually want to provide the parking and some maybe want to use parking as a way to say no, because they might not have the space or ability to provide the parking. I'm not sure, or it's just
So
that,
does this wording, again, so it says back in the previous section, any ADU shall have no more than 2.
No, it works.
So
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
the cap.
Right.
And the floor is none if they
Right.
request that.
Right.
Okay, Jennifer.
Okay, I don't know, this may be more, we'd have to make it as possible zoning amendment, but my concern isn't so much that the ADU only have 1 space. It's the number of parking spaces that are allowed on the property. So there's 2 student houses right on the other side of my backyard fence, 4 in each house, so there's 8, and every year there's 8 cars. Responding to the public comment, what makes it more palatable is it's gravel. They haven't paved over. But there's 8 cars parked between the 2 houses, 2 blocks from campus. But again, is there anything we can do to, you know, put a limit on the number of spaces on a property? It's not so much whether they go to the ADU or the primary.
Yeah, I mean, typically we'd say that the lot and building coverage, you know, the dimensional standards would apply there. I think it's really, you know, getting back to, you know, in our zoning bylaw, we do say if there's so many parking spaces, it needs a permit. So 5 or more. I think the difficulty is, you know, and most people probably don't realize that, you know, they think they could put a gravel down on the property. Is it even, you know, does it even meet our definition or standard for parking, or is it just a gravel area that they park cars on? If it's rented, it should, you know, be part of the parking plan for, you know, according to the bylaw. So to me, you know, there's a few different ways to manage that. I think the residential rental property bylaw through the general bylaws is the right way to do it. I think, you know, I don't think we could do it here within the ADU section. I think, you know, agree that's a different kind of zoning discussion or discussion about, the use of a property. To me, we're relying on our dimensional standards and other pieces of the zoning bylaw that may be captured, but, you know, yeah, I
We
don't,
couldn't say this maximum on a property with a protected use ADU. Because again, you know, when houses are rented to students, unlike a family, families
Well-
usually don't have one car per, you know.
well,
family
we're saying
member.
right now, we're saying that there should be no more than 3 on-site parking spaces provided for any ADU. And so, you know, that's a, you know, that there's a driveway, there's still the allowance for the driveway and drive aisle, but we're saying you can't have more than 3 on-site parking spaces for the ADU. So if someone builds an ADU, I'm not,
Yes, I'm saying you add it to the 4 that are already there in most
Or-
cases.
yeah,
Then
exactly.
you have 7.
Yeah. Kathy and then Councillor Haneke, and I'd like to come back to the 3 versus 2 and solidify our thoughts on that so that we can move on from that. Kathy,
I'm completely focused on 3 versus 2. I think 2 is fine. I'm sorry I jumped to 1. 2 would work here. And just Jennifer, up above this, it says there shall be a parking plan. So whatever the building commissioner can be doing, there has to be a parking plan. And then this puts a cap and linking it to the ADU. And Mandy, I was just curious, were you going to, for the protected use, no more than 2, for the local use, no more than 3? But basically, I think going to 2 for, this says for any ADU. I think, because this, I read this as in addition to whatever is there. You know, so you have parking places for principal
Right.
residents, and this is in addition. It's not saying there can be no more than 2, period. So if we wanted to put it to a vote, I would vote on changing the word 3 to 2. And I don't know whether we've finished the discussion on that, but I would be happy.
can I see a show of hands going from 3 to 2?
Okay, so this is just that.
I
Yeah.
wanted to hear from Mandy first. I don't know what she wants to talk about,
Okay, yep.
unless it's not connected.
It's not really connected. I was just going to correct Jennifer's statement of most people don't have a car per person. Our family
right.
does. It sounds like Pat's family does. It sounds like Pam's family does. Many families actually have 1 car per person living in their household. So to make a
Yeah.
general statement that says most don't is potentially inaccurate.
So are we ready to vote on 2 versus 3? Changing
Yes.
3 or not?
Yes, actually, I have one quick question for Nate, though. So what I'm understanding, though, and I support 2. And let's do the 2 to 3, 3 to 2 first, and just show your mitt. Okay, I think that's a consensus. But let's clarify, Nate. So you can have in front of your ADU, you could have your 2 parking spaces that are allowed by our bylaws in front of the house. And you can have 2 designated parking stalls that are created somewhere else. That's a total of 4 for that ADU. The same applies to the principal dwelling. You can have 2 cars parked outside in front of your house, in the front setback of the house, and they can have as many parking spaces behind that house as they want. Is that correct?
so the bylaw, you know, it states they can only have 2 cars parked in the front in the setback. And so that, you know, if in your instance, there's 4 parking in the front setback, so really you can only have 2.
Okay.
Yep.
So both the house and the ADU only get 2 in the front setback.
Right. I think
Okay,
and
Thank
then in
you.
terms of like, you know, how it's arranged, it comes down to the parking plan. So, you know, is it part of the driveway or is it really a parking space? And so I think that's something that will be determined when they submit a parking plan.
Right.
And so if, you know, if they have if someone wants to put a long driveway and put the parking behind the structure, you know, as long as they're meeting the dimensional standards, you know, it's their expense to have a long driveway.
Okay, any other comments on I? Let's move to 50114, specific requirements.
Yeah, so these are-
Anything?
oh.
Go ahead, Nate.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, I was going to say that these are for just for protected use. And they're really all part of the regulation. So no minimum lot size required for protected use. The more permissive, the planning board added this parenthetical least restrictive dimensional regulation found in Article 6 of the zoning bylaw for a detached family dwelling. Principal dwelling or accessory structure shall apply to the protected use ADU. And so, with that, so really there's three, we don't necessarily have it. Some communities may, but there could be different dimensional standards for all three types of structures mentioned here. In Amherst, we do have a different, say, setback requirement for an accessory structure compared to, say, the principal dwelling on a property. And so if someone were building a protected ADU, they're allowed to get closer to the side setback or rear setback than side property line than the principal dwelling. And then if, for instance, then for the height, if we allow a principal dwelling to be 2 floors, then they can get up to 2 floors. So an ADU can be closer and taller, but they still then have to be within their gross square foot calculation. So there's a number of factors that will kind of guide the development of an ADU if it's detached or, changing where it's located, if it's outside the existing structure. And then the parking requirement we just added. If there are not any questions. And then 5010115 specific requirements for local accessory dwelling units. We require an owner occupancy, and that then is something, a deed restriction filed at the registry. So that's something we have in our bylaw now, and now we're saying we'll continue to apply to a local ADU. We have B here, which has been modified. So a local ADU shall be designed so that the appearance and scale of structure is compatible with the principal dwelling. C, Mandy, I see your hand. I can pause then.
Oh, it's
Yeah,
an easy
Counselor
one
Hanky.
in A.
Okay.
There's again, an extraneous comma after building commissioner.
Commissioner, right.
That's it.
All right. C, so some of this is like parallel, so it's also explanatory, compared to protected. So we're saying here that all dimensional standards found in the zoning bylaw, including those for accessory structures and Table 3 dimensional regulations, apply to the local ADU, with the exception of the additional lot area family requirement. And so, sometimes I think, Kathy, you said, oh, could we make the bylaw shorter? And for instance, we could eliminate something like this. I think then what to me it does is it opens up a lot of questions, like what applies to local, what applies to protected. So, and then the planning board, we had a statement or two about gross floor area, and they, like this one, the gross floor area for a local ADU does not include the area of unfinished basement space used for storage or utilities. And so, if you're building a local ADU, your basement of compliant ceiling height is now not part of your gross floor area calculation.
What if they go back and finish it the year after?
Well, technically they're supposed to get a permit to do that. And if they exceed the gross floor area, that wouldn't be allowed as the accessory dwelling unit.
Kathy?
Kathy, you're muted.
I am. Unusual. This allows it to be bigger than 1,200. So I think the includes it. Once we say a basement is 7 feet tall, so it could be finished, I think it should be includes a basement and attic to the extent they're habitable. Whatever the old definition, Rob, was, that an attic that excludes crawl spaces. But I think we're allowing a pretty big building and making it even bigger. So I'm not going to go against the 1,200, but not including the basement and is, I think, a mistake. And the gross floor area up above in protected excludes the attic, and I don't want to exclude the attic. If the attic, so someone would have to tell me, of the technical people, I don't mean a little crawl space attic. I mean an attic that could eventually become, it's got plenty of ceiling height, so there's something to do with the ceiling height that says the attic could be converted. So if we're going all the way to 1,200, I don't think allowing it to still be bigger makes sense. That's my comment.
Thank you. Yeah,
But I
thank
don't-
you.
But I don't know how to fix it.
Thank
I
you.
would just delete that D right there. I mean, it
Mm.
doesn't capture the attic space, but then, we're not having this different definition of gross floor
You,
area for
you
a
could have
local.
it be the same definition, and I would
Right.
be okay with it. I would be, as the one that's
Yep.
up and protected.
So let me just double check then. Kathy, you're saying you'd like to see D say gross floor area shall include the area of an unfinished basement used for storage if it meets the height or the building code
Actually,
qualifications.
Pam, I was backing off it. If we use the same definition that we used up here, I was fine, rather than up above, a basement is included, and an attic was excluded. Here we were excluding the basement. And so I think it's simpler if it's the same definition. So we're
Yeah,
not
yeah.
doing anything special. And then
Yeah.
somehow gross square area shall be counted the same way as we just did for protected, to make it simpler. I wouldn't do something special for here, but the thing that was special here was including something that wasn't included above.
Okay, thank you. And then Councilor Haneke, and then I think, so I'm hearing that D just comes right out.
I wouldn't support that actually. I liked this addition. Last hearing day, I struggled with having two different definitions to determine floor area by using different things. So, in some sense, what Kathy says is where I struggled, but last time the writing was habitable square footage versus gross square footage, and those were wildly different definitions. I like that this gets us closer to where the current bylaw is, in terms of determining square footage, while keeping the definition as close to gross square footage as possible. And our current bylaw is 1,000 square feet of habitable space, which would not include an unfinished basement, that is of the right ceiling height. But it's 1,200 square feet for accessible ADUs, I believe. So, and that's of habitable. And so the 1,200 gross floor area is actually, in some sense, if you include unfinished basement space that is of ceiling height, in the gross square footage, is a lot smaller than our current bylaw allows to be built. And if we're trying to get the local ADU to be as close to the current bylaw as possible while using similar definitions to the protected use ADU, D makes a lot of sense to me. And so, you can't finish it. And I understand there are people that might finish it on the sly, but having a unfinished basement of ceiling height allows you to put your washer and dryer in the unfinished basement and not take up living space for it that's counted to the ADU, unlike in the protected use where you have to count that space. So I actually like D. I like the solution that the planning board provided to get us closer to habitable space while not creating an entirely new definition.
Okay,
Can I
thank
just
you.
ask
Kathy.
Mandy, what happens now, or Rob, what happens now with attics in our old habitable? What happens with an attic?
An attic that is finished will count as habitable space,
An unfinished attic would not have counted?
would not have counted.
So Mandy, what Mandy is saying, this gets closer to what we have now?
Right.
Yes,
So
we don't have a limitation on basement in any way now.
Yeah. I'm okay with it. It just seems like a stepwise process, but I'm okay with it. They don't get any more parking spaces out of it. So it looks like we are at the end of this document. There have been some really good discussions about some aspects of this bylaw. I'm looking at the time. It is 10 of 5. And we are so very close to calling the question.
Yes. Sorry, just quickly, it looks like, there are a few grammatical pieces, a few commas removed, and then, I just scrolled through. It looks like really, I tried to highlight the areas that had big changes, and so it was, this parking piece, and then this one condition in terms of the, clearly accessory too. And so I don't see that there are many other changes to this version. I just want to make sure I didn't miss anything.
And I think I'm not sure if we settled the 90% of the primary
I was
principal
vote-
dwelling.
I was voted down. We voted against B.
Okay, all right. Counselor Haneke.
Yeah, I mean, if we're ready, I'm happy to move to close the hearing and then make the motion on a recommendation.
I think that would be great.
So I'll move to close the public hearing on the ADU amendments.
Second,
Let's take a vote. Counselor Haneke.
Aye.
Pam Rooney is an aye. Pat DeAngelis. Jennifer Taub.
yes.
Kathy Shane.
Yes.
Great.
Next. So I guess we're moving on to
So a motion to recommend.
whatever action item 4A is, right?
Yep.
So I'll move to action item 4A, I'll move to recommend that the town council adopt the Article 5 accessory dwelling units amendments and rescission, but rescind the current Article 5.011 and adopt the amendments as amended at the 9/11/2025 CRC meeting.
Shane seconds.
I'm making sure I kind of get the gist. Okay. Great. Let's take a vote. Pat.
Aye.
Pam is an aye. Counselor Haneke.
Aye.
Jennifer Taub.
Yes.
Kathy Shane.
Yes.
Great. Good job, everybody. Thank you, Nate. Thank you, Rob. So I will write up the report that will go to, I guess it goes to GOL also, on its way to Happy Council time. Okay, that was good. Kathy.
I just have a request when you write up the report. There were two, and I took notes. There were two where we had 3-2 votes to reflect those. You know,
Yes,
one was
I
on
will try
adding
to
the
do that.
90%. One was adding the 90%, the other was on 2 types or not. But that,
Oh, yeah.
but you did get 5 people voting for it as amended, you know, so I'm not trying to nullify, but I want it to reflect that
Speech in a minute.
there was some substance where not everyone was agree, but on the whole, we were in agreement. Thanks.
Thank you. Counselor Haneke.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure we didn't skip general public comment. I know it's late, but we technically have to have it because
Yes.
public comment.
Yes,
we
I'm
have
trying to
is
get through
part of
I'm trying to
public
get there.
hearing.
There's no one in the
There's
audience.
no one, but we need to at least say it. So I just wanted to make
Yes.
sure we didn't skip
Thank
that
you.
as we go to close.
I'm trying to move on to the next items. We are now opening for general public comment. I see 0 attendees in the audience. I'll wait for 1 second. Nobody raised their hand. General public comment period is closed. We are moving to action into number 5, which is next agenda preview.
5 minutes.
Pardon?
5 is
We
minutes.
have no minutes. There were no
okay.
minutes provided us. Yeah.
Okay.
Nothing provided. So next preview is we can take off Article 5. We have solar bylaw, housing production plan. I put in Bess because we've been carrying the document from Chris Brestrup for a while. And I also want to add carryover items for end of year. Is there anything else And if there are carryover items that people are thinking about, email me, because we do need to respond to Lynn Griesmer relatively soon so that she can structure the agendas. Kathy?
I think that's too much on an agenda. Sorry. But really, I mean, we need to get further on the solar bylaw that we have to do the housing production plan. I have a lot of comments on it, and to then also say, what are we carrying over? I mean, hopefully we're not carrying over the solar bylaw. So I just think that's too much, Pam.
So we probably won't, we don't
That's
need to
my
talk.
comment on the agenda.
Okay, so I will cross off best because that's a brand new topic and it hasn't been assigned to us. So solar bylaw, housing production plan, carryover can be a fairly short 5-minute conversation. Pat?
No, I was just going to say that the housing production plan is, I think we should just accept it as it is. I don't I'm glad you have a lot of comments, but it's really not up to us to redesign it. And it also seems to me that it's simply a document that's put in so that we can apply for grants and things like that. It just doesn't seem to be some major agenda for me.
Okay, so that means in your mind that there wouldn't be a much of a conversation period next meeting when we do talk about
I
it.
don't think so, but yeah, I could,
Okay.
I'm usually
Jen-
wrong about that.
Jennifer?
I have a lot of comments.
Yeah,
Okay,
I'm
Kathy?
not surprised.
I'm sure not.
Okay, so it sounds
and-
like next meeting we need, if we divide pretty evenly between solar and housing production plan, that'll give about 45 minutes to an hour on each of those topics.
Nate has his hand up.
Nate?
Sure, thanks. Yeah, I was just going to encourage, Jennifer, anyone who has comments on the housing production plan to send those to me by email. So Kathy, thanks. I think, it's just helpful to be prepared. And then, so the consultant has really finished their work. We've reached back out to them. They'd be willing to make some changes. I guess some of it would be, through the discussion with the CRC, what do we think is really necessary to be changed in the plan? And so, if there is something, sure, but that's something to talk through, but it'd be great to get them ahead of time. I can share them with staff, and if we think we want to share them with the consultant, we could, but at least, staff is prepared to answer them or explain them. And I can help facilitate the conversation next time.
Okay, so this, rather than not get into conversation
Right.
because it really wasn't on our, well, it was on our agenda today, but just a comment that comments that were made back in May didn't get reflected in the document. So that's one of the comments.
I
that
sent 3 pages
needs-
to the consultant before the June
Yeah,
1st
I
deadline.
sent several pages. So it sounds like we have plenty to talk about at our next meeting. I too would very much like to get through the solar, and I think all of you need to look at the wording that Rob Mora provided us on financial surety. That may be quickly adopt it, get that taken care of, and then work through the last part of the document. I'd like to start with solar bylaw, if that makes, if production plan is not as much work as we think, great. But I would like to start with solar. Kathy?
Yeah, I just, Pat, just a quick reaction to yours. My understanding is, as a counselor, I'm not supposed to weigh in with written opinions about a document that's about to become policy. So I refrained during the initial thing because I couldn't just say, as resident, I'm doing this. It's also, so this is an opportunity to have a fuller discussion. I love the tables. I love the information. I have some issues with conclusions and some issues with some wording, just so you know, and so it's not, I think we should all read these documents extremely carefully because they represent a consensus view of us as a town and as a council. So that's all. I didn't weigh in because I thought I wasn't supposed to, in terms of opinions, so this is going to be my chance. Not to mention, I was physically not in the country, but beyond that, I took notes and then I thought I just shouldn't send them in. I should be
Okay,
careful.
let's wrap up. It's almost 5. Thank you. Counselor Haneke and then Jennifer.
I support next agenda being split evenly between solar bylaw and housing production plan. I like that plan and I hope we can stick to it. And
Yep.
we might have to do that for a couple meetings, but it would be nice to make sure we touch on everything at all meetings. Just one request for the housing production plan from Nate, not on specifics, but on legal obligations. What is the council's role? What was the planning board's role? I understand the planning board already adopted it, I think. So just if you could next week address, or next meeting address what, in some sense, what we're doing with the planning, the housing production.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, quickly, I could say that, the state, the regulation says that in order to submit it to the state for approval, it needs to be adopted by the planning board and, by, say, in Amherst, the council as the town's affordable housing plan. So it has to be adopted as that. There's no legal obligation to do anything with the plan. And so, the first step is the state approves it and it says it meets all the requirements of the plan. So it has a needs assessment, it has goals, it has strategies, there was like a public outreach component. And then if you meet your production goals of so many units permitted in a calendar year or a 12-month period, then you get certified. And communities would try to get a housing production plan approved and then certified so that they're at safe harbor so they could deny a comprehensive permit. Amherst is at safe harbor because we're above our 10% threshold on the SHI. To me, really, we've had this in the budget, and the idea of doing a housing production plan for a number of years. It was stalled because of the pandemic and we're waiting for new census information. We use it as our, we like it as our housing plan, our affordable plan. And so to me, it was a document. A planning board member asked, well, why are we doing this if we're above 10%? And it's like, well, it's nice to have updated information about what our needs are as a community for housing and affordable housing. And so there's really no legal obligation if we adopt this plan. The next step would be, if we liked it, is then what legally do we do? Do we change our housing policy as a community? Do we change our zoning bylaw? Do we change our regulations? What does the planning board work on? What does CRC work on? And so to me, it's, if we don't like a strategy in the plan, we just don't like it and we don't do anything with it. There's no legal obligation then to investigate every strategy or idea they have in the plan. And that's not a requirement. It's really, does the town like this as our affordable housing plan? And is the CRC comfortable voting and recommending it as the town's affordable housing plan?
Okay, we'll have that conversation more fully next time. Okay. Announcements. Next CRC meeting is September 25, 3 p.m. And the chair's report on inclusionary zoning did go to GOL on 9/1. Nothing anticipated 48 hours in advance. And I'd like to adjourn. Thank you, everybody, for that really good conversation. That was really productive. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved. Second.
Second, Pat.
Aye.
Pam's an aye. Counselor Haneke.
Aye.
Kathy Shane.
Yes.
Jennifer Taub.
Yes.
Thank you, Nate, very, very much.
Thanks.
Thanks, Athena, for keeping an eye out for us.